All right. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Sally Baker. I am our Director of Education here at Family Connection. And tonight we have Dr. Thomas with us, who's going to talk about how to get ready for the middle school and high school years. It's a big challenge. But I'm going to let Dr. Thomas kind of do her introductions and get the show on the road. And then if you guys, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions and you want to throw them in the chat, just feel free and I will make sure that Dr. Thomas sees those and we will go from there.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I am actually a consultant that works with Family Connections, but I was a special education director and retired from public education after 30 years of service. And now I do consulting and in the areas of special education. So I'm excited to be here, and I love being able to work with Family Connections. What a great organization, and certainly an organization that was helpful to me as a public school administrator. And so it's great to be here. We're going to have a little conversation. We got a small group, so do absolutely, if you have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand. If I don't see them, then Sally's going to say, hey, we got questions. And we're going to talk about that very important time, if I can get this up, of getting ready for the start of school for middle and high school students. And I have been through that as a parent, and now am watching my grandson, who is going into 6th grade. And I much prefer to be the grandparent going through this than as a parent. And so tonight, really, what we're gonna talk about and share is just some resources. There's a lot, and we will email you those resources and this PowerPoint slide, and so that you can have the resources. That's what it's all about. And I'm just going to give you some tips from working with schools. I know how principals and view some things from their perspective. I know certainly from a district perspective, and I know from that parent perspective. And so the more we can kind of talk and get ready together, the better off we are. This is just our slide that talks about Family Connection being our parent training and information center that is partially funded through IDEA dollars, and to provide training and assistance to families. So if you have a tween or a teen, and so we know that, some people say the tweens start at 10, most people say 11 and 12. But those just a few years before those they become an official teen. These are those middle school years. Tonight, just some helpful hints for preparing, some strategies for building relationships with your schools, and then lots of resources. And you'll notice I'm one of these people that said, I don't expect success, I prepare for it. Ryan Reynolds said that. And so the more we prepare for the start of the year, and I know some schools are starting like next week. I think one district started this week. And so some are starting earlier and earlier, and that's great, but there's still some things we want to make sure that we do. And one of the things about having that tween or teen is that we want to involve them in the planning. This is an important time that we're starting to build those skills that we want them to have. And so as we're thinking about what do we need, we want to talk to them about those things and do this planning together. And one of the reasons for that is because self-determination is one of the skills that we want to build in our students. These are what we consider self-determination skills. And I found this cute little chart and I thought, okay, this kind of says it all. But things about choice making, problem solving, goal setting, decision making, self-regulation, leadership, self-advocacy, and self-awareness. Those are considered those top skills. And so when we think about that for being a healthy adult, how important that is. And so the more we can help our children, our adolescents, I try to use the term adolescents because, they don't like to be children anymore. The more we can start building those, the better off they're going to be. And unfortunately, one of the things we know about our students with disabilities is this is a general weakness. And so one of the things you'll see in school, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is these things will be taught in special education to prepare students for exiting. And so you'll see I've put some links on here. These go to some resources. This is a great one for parents about self-determination, to kind of talk about what it is and things that you can do. There's curriculum that schools will use to teach these skills, because these are things, we all use every day. And then one of the things is we want our adolescents to be self-advocates. We want them to be able to advocate their needs. And this starts now. This is where we teach it. We don't wait till they get to be an adult. They need to be practicing this now so that they can express what they need to help them learn. And for many of them, they need those barriers removed. And so I've always loved it because, I feel like when I was teaching and my students could say, that accommodation you're using, I don't like it. It doesn't help me. Okay. Who knows better? And so we want to recognize that they do recognize and involve them. And so those are things we want to, the part of getting ready, this is a great time to start teaching these things. And then I've got a link there for some best practices in self advocacy. One of the things that we want to make sure is that we've got a good clear picture of your child, of your adolescent. You probably do as a parent, but also we want to make sure they have a good clear picture and they thought through this. And one way that we can do this is to tell them we're conducting an interview. This is great practice for them for school. And find out, what is it you like? What are things that, what do you think you do well? What are things that, you really enjoy doing? What are things you don't like? And then kind of what are some things you need help in? And then who are those preferred adults that you really trust? And making them think about that ahead of time can help us with kind of identifying some things they may need. And that's information we can share with the school. And this is true, for some of our adolescents, you may be using picture symbols for them to express this. They may not have language, but you can start putting some things there so that we have things to tell. I was working with a young man that had some behavioral concerns, and it was so helpful for me to know that he was a big Spider-Man, because when I did it, he loved Spider-Man. Knowing that helps, believe it or not. And so if we can think about that and get them, our adolescents, to think about, so what is it? What would I tell somebody? Well, knowing he liked Spider-Man helped me, because I'm telling you, his behavior contract had Spider-Man. I found Spider-Man reinforcers. I found, right. So these are things we want to know, and knowing what students don't prefer and then being able to talk about that is important. So I want to start with mental and physical health, because this is the time of change, right? I don't know. I can see two people on my camera, but how many of, and some of you have your cameras off, but how are you starting to see those changes physically and with mental health with your adolescents? I used to say that my son was the sweetest boy, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. And so we know this is a tough time. If you've taught those middle grade levels or high school like I have, they're all over the place. I think middle schools are hilarious because, it's everything from those who look like grown people to those who are just starting to mature. And so bless our middle school teachers and administrators, because they do such an awesome job with that group. So let's talk about that, because this is where this change is really occurring. And one of the things that we really have to work hard on right now is getting those routines in place for them. It's summer. I know my 11-year-old grandson, I mean, he's so not on a schedule or routine, it's not even funny. My son was saying, oh, we got to start getting back in it. But we want to make sure that when we think about routines, that we have those steps and they need to be written down. And they become routine when we've practiced them enough. And so I really do like to talk about creating those routines with your adolescent. Let them be involved because that is a skill. How many of I'm getting so old now, you know, I've got this routine in the morning with all this skincare stuff, and I keep adding more and more the older I get, right? And I pull everything out and I put it in order so that I don't forget, right? I have a routine. So think about those things that cause issues. Maybe getting up in the morning and getting dressed and getting breakfast, and work on what are the steps that we're going to do every day, and let them help develop those. Write them down and get some visuals. And so if your adolescent is nonverbal, do this with them with non-visuals, maybe have them point and do some things like that to develop these, and then post them. Put them on the mirror. I love my son has now, they're reminding him to put on his deodorant, right? And so they've gotten their bathroom, brush your teeth, deodorant, you know, couple of those little hygiene things for the bathroom. And so for morning. So those are important. They're posted up on their mirror in the bathroom. I'm thinking this goes for old people like me too. I probably need to just write them down. Uh, but routines are great. And that creates that structure in our environment and helps so that we don't have those nightmares before we're going to school or at bedtime. The more we have them, the better off we are. And then think of ways that you're going to reinforce your adolescent for following those routines, because there's got to be something in it for them to really shape their behavior. So you can do an old timey chart like this, you know, that's great, put it on there. But we have to have a way to measure it, because this is how we shape behavior. We reinforce often when they're first doing it. And then that behavior becomes routine and we can delay. So I think about it, you know, now I can just use my grandchildren as examples, right? So I got one that's potty training right now, little one. So she gets a Skittle, right? Every time she goes to the potty right now, she gets a Skittle. And so, but eventually she won't need that, because once she gets that, the behavior's been shaped and she's doing it. Hope is soon for my daughter's sake. This is a great, I love this app. There's some others, but I like this one, Chores and Allowance. You can actually set up a reinforcer. It's an app. So you can look at apps and say, what can I do? So you can actually set up a system where they're earning, and you can use, you can use money, and that money can be used to get to a privilege, right? It doesn't have to be real money. It can be, when you get $20 in this, you get to select the movie for our Friday night movie night. So any of those things, it's a great one. For some of our adolescents, just depending on their level, you may still be using stickers, and that's fine. Whatever works. And that's something that you want to talk to them about, but you can't get those routines developed without doing some reinforcement for it. And that makes your home run a lot smoother. And these are just some great resources on routines. Another big thing we have to think about is making sure our adolescent is getting enough sleep. And one of the things that is just problematic with some, like students who have ADHD, a lot of times sleep is very problematic, and yet we're entering these years where sleep is so important. So making sure tweens need 9 to 12 hours and teens need 8 to 10 hours. So that means if they have trouble falling asleep, we got to back up that routine of getting ready to go to bed. It's really important. This is interesting. The sleep-wake cycles begin to shift up to 2 hours later at the start of puberty. And this is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. All of this I pulled from their suggestions on healthychildren.org, and I'm going to share that website with you. It's a fabulous one. And that's interesting because one of the things they say is that schools should start later for middle and high school kids because that is just their natural shift in their cycle. And so I know where I was, they finally did shift schedules, and the middle school start at 8:30, high school start at 9. And so you see that in a lot of places, and that is better for them. And this is just back to making sure that we've got a good routine for getting ready for bed. And you might have to start really early. I was a kid who had trouble falling asleep. And so, I couldn't watch TV. Well, I didn't have a TV in my room. My friends did, but I didn't. No media. I could read a book. That was my activity. And I had to, and it started, 30 minutes ahead of time, so that was important. And then making sure that you're creating that safe environment, no matter what it is for that child. It's really important that we try to, make sure their bedroom is a place where they want to be, where they're not afraid, making sure that the lighting, social media needs to be put away. Kids are getting in a lot of trouble at nighttime. Put it in your, my grandchildren they put theirs in the kitchen. They can't have it. They can't take it to their room. And so those are some important things that you create those environments for sleep. And this is healthy sleeping habits. This comes from healthychildren.org, which is a website sponsored by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it has some great hints in there. We also notice this is a time for fitness changes, right? So some of your children may be very athletic and want to do things, some may not. This is when we can kind of see some weight gain, and we want to make sure that we're keeping them healthy and involving them in whatever it is they want to do. This is a great time to get them involved in, individual fitness, certainly being involved in recreational ball. We do know that particularly for our middle school age, it's really important for them to have that after school, some activities. It's important. It keeps them, it really reduces the risk-taking behavior that they start to experience during those years. There's some things here, teen fitness, and then some things about students with disabilities that I've shared with you. Remember, you might contact your Special Olympics of South Carolina. They do have some activities for students. It depends on the region and where they are, but also contact your community recreation department. So I was looking, I live in the Charleston area, and I was looking in the recreation, they have even specialized programs for students with disabilities. I know Greenville does. I know Lexington County does. And so be sure you're checking to see, are there some things that I can get them involved with that are really suited to them, that's in their interest area and preference. And then we have that nutrition. And any of y'all have those that only want to eat junk food? That is definitely my 11-year-old grandson now. I mean, it's like junk. So this is a time, once again, that we're learning self-regulation. And so we want to work with them on nutrition. This is a good website that you can kind of go to and take a look at some things you can do. Interestingly enough, boys require an average of 2,800 calories a day, and girls require an average of 2,200 during their teen years. I need a lot less than that, but I'm afraid some days I eat that much. So making sure that you're watching their diet and what they're taking in and getting those good, healthy choices for them. And then I really want to talk about good mental health and the importance of really building that now at home. Um, we know the number one thing is being connected, and students who are more successful and avoid that risk-taking behavior report that they have a feeling of connectedness to people at school, to people in their community, and at home. So develop those talking openly and honestly with your child. And I don't know, whether you have girls or boys. My daughter talked very openly. My son, how was school today? Fine. It was not like that. Um, and then make sure that you are supervising their activities and promote good choices. Middle school, particularly, you have really got to stay on it. You've got to stay on the social media. I'm going to share a couple of things with that, but it's really important. And then spending time with them doing some of the things that they want to do. They need supervision right now. Middle schoolers need supervision more than ever. And yet it's the age where we feel like, oh, I can leave them alone because, they're able to handle it. And so you really have to keep a balance there, and then stay connected to their school and friends. Keep an eye on that, and then watch for those warning signs. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those warning signs. The Center for Disease Control has a nice thing about mental health for youth. But these are things that you want to go ahead and start thinking about if you start seeing, because that doesn't mean if they have one of them that something's wrong. But if you start seeing multiple things, you really want to take a look. So certainly changes in sleep, weight, eating habits, or any of those everyday things, loss of interest in doing things that they used to love, withdrawing more than usual from friends and family and community, canceling plans with their closest friends with really no explanation, academic struggles that are different from what they were before. Particularly if it's a favorite subject or something and they start failing, that's something, we see. And teachers should be looking for that too. If they are overly worried and are almost obsessed with that, those are things that we would be concerned about, particularly if it's a change, a whole new set of friends. If all of a sudden there's a whole new group, we need to find out about that group. And then if they kind of are closing up, certainly signs of drug or alcohol, you just got to check. You just, you know what, you got to check the backpacks, you got to check the rooms, you got to do it. You have to do it, because they're not going to put it out in front of you, but you want to make sure and that they are okay. And then this is a great article on how to know when your child needs help. And if you start seeing some of those things that you're worried about, you can certainly contact the counselor at school, and they can connect you and help you with some ways to handle those things if you're worried. But we have to be, we have to do our due diligence. Just remember, before you go, there's some things you need to make sure of, and I would involve my tween or teen in helping to find this information. Make sure, particularly if it's a new school, that you know the enrollment requirements, and find out about registration. Do you have to register every year? It's interesting, in Charleston, you have to register, and you have to have a notary sign that you live where you live every year of school. So my daughter's got one starting school in Charleston for the first time, and she said, Mom, I've got to get a notary to do this. But she did find that out. So if you're not sure, particularly for a new school, make sure you know what's required. Most of our schools have this on their website. See if there's an orientation. Make sure, if there is, when's it going to be, because a lot of times they'll do those, at night or several days before school actually starts. And then make sure you know the requirements for health. Make sure you know about, how the school operates with the health program. Make sure that you're sharing information about your child's health, everything they need to know. Making sure that if your child needs to get immunized, they've done it. Remember, there are some exceptions, but you have to get that in writing, or they won't keep your child in school. We will share with you some guidelines. They change them every year, and so they'll be in the information we share that shows you what they have to do. If your child is going to need to take medicine at school, you can't just send it in their book bag. There are all kind of rules. So make sure that you've checked those out. You know, we know we can't trust teens and tweens with medications. That doesn't go well generally. There are some exceptions for some things, and you'll want to follow through with that. And then also, lastly, if your child's going to be involved in sports or activities, you need to find out what the requirements are for physicals. That's nothing worse than them thinking they're going to, even if it's an intramural, a lot of times they'll make them have a physical for that. And then make sure you understand the rules about being sick, when your child's supposed to go to school, and when they need to stay home. And, you know, I guess that's one thing COVID has taught us, is that we don't need to send our children to school sick. And then let's just talk about a school visit. Sally and I were talking before we started that for some of your adolescents, they may be anxious about school. And so a lot of times I know students that are starting middle school, they'll take them over to the middle school in the spring for a field trip. That's a long time between then and the start of the school year. And so a lot of times, for particularly if they have some anxiety, call and make an appointment and ask if you can come in and bring and walk around the school and find the cafeteria when there's nobody there. That's very helpful. Most schools, you know, schools have administrators in the building during the summer. I know my son's met a couple of families already that wanted just to come and walk the school. My son's an assistant principal. And so don't hesitate to do that, because that's a good thing that can help. Do make sure that you're sharing your child's special needs. And I just say this because your child, if you're participating in Family Connections, a lot of times your child has a 504, an IEP. And what's supposed to happen is that information is supposed to be shared from the professionals. We have such a shortage now of teachers. We have brand new teachers that are coming in that have not gotten everything. So just give that little extra nice note. I just want to let you know my child has an IEP. And here's some things you really need to know. I have always appreciated that as a teacher, because even sometimes there are things that maybe aren't on the IEP, but are directly related to their disability. So make sure you're sending that. You can, you know, send an email. There are a lot of ways you can do that, but do make sure you're sharing that information. It's really important. Let's see if I can get this to go. Make sure you get a copy of that handbook and read it and understand all the rules. And then make sure that you do so much electronically, but make sure that you've gotten forms, that you have filled them out and turned them in. There are a lot of different things that get sent home, but it's really important that the school have all the information that they need. Make sure you inquire about extracurricular. Some schools have clubs. There are all kinds of arts that your child can sign up for. Some of them, you know, some during the school day, after school sports. And I just say this to remind you, being involved with this for some of our students, this is why they come to school, right? It is not for reading and math and the academics. They're at school because they love sports or they love music, or so we want to kind of tap into something that draws them to school. And I just want to remind you that the law says We have to provide those supplementary aids and services for those extracurricular activities to the maximum extent appropriate. And I will always give this example of a student that years ago I was working with, and he was actually hard of hearing, and he wanted to play football. And we got the interpreter there, but it was not safe. And even the mom and the student realized this wasn't going to be something they were going to be able to do in this place. So remember, appropriateness does matter. But if your child wants to, maybe needs an interpreter and wants to be in a club, then we have to provide that interpreter for those events, for those things that they're doing. And you cannot be excluded because of a disability. And so just kind of just know that that's there. And then I always tell people before you buy school supplies, and boy, they're out, aren't they? Boy, July 4th didn't even get over with. And, you know, Target's like, and I want to go buy them because I love school supplies. Make sure you've checked the supply list. Make sure you know the rules about book bags and water bottles, things like that. A lot of schools now are going to clear book bags for safety reasons. Inquire about that, and then make sure you know the dress code, and that, you know, you follow it, and because you don't want to be buying stuff that they're not going to be able to wear. And most schools are pretty clear about that. It's usually in the handbook. Get the information on attendance, get the school calendar. And please, 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 when you get that calendar, look and see, when are these early release days? When are teacher work days? When are, and make sure you know those things way ahead, because you need to make arrangements, but also those are great times to make appointments for your child so that they're not having to miss instruction. And so those are times that you want to try to get them to the dentist or for their doctor's appointment. I can't stress enough, make sure you understand the rules for arrival and dismissal. Having been the person who directed traffic for 8 years at my school, I'm very appreciative when parents have read the expectations for getting to school, and that you're getting there on time and doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's a lot to get a lot of cars. So I think my son was telling me they have 500 cars that come through in the morning, dropping people off. That's a lot, you know, and so we all got to follow rules. Make sure you've looked at what the tardy policy is, and that you're making sure your child gets to school on time, and then any of the other attendance things that schools have. And then transportation is a big one, you know, certainly making sure that if your child is on the bus, that you have gotten information. If your teen or tween is on a specialized transportation as part of the IEP, that should be door-to-door pickup. You should know, usually they'll call. If you don't hear from transportation, you call them and make sure that you know those things, and you know that you've got the time and understand all of that, and that you've talked to your child about being safe on the bus. And there's some great school bus safety tips there. Once again, this is about knowing where you drop off and pick up. Don't block up the wrong line. People don't like that, and then you get identified as that parent. So make sure that you've got that. If you have a teen driver, you need to talk with them about the rules. Y'all need to go over those together so that they know very specific rules about what happens, where they're supposed to park, that they're supposed to go directly to the building. And usually they have supervision in our parking lot. So you want to make sure they know. And certainly now, if they're walking, be sure you're talking about stranger danger. We had in my neighborhood just about a month ago, 16-year-old girl was out visiting her grandparents, was out riding her bike, and a gentleman stopped and started talking to her. And she kind of turned the other way, and he drove his car around and got in front of her. And so, you know, we're never we've got to keep warning. Fortunately, she was pretty good, and she went the other way and rode, got back to the house, reported it. But make sure that you're reminding if your child's walking or riding a bike. Same thing with the bus stop. Strangers come up to the bus stop, just that constant reminder, because unfortunately we have some really bad people in this world. And then if you do have some things about food for the school, if your child has allergies, make sure the school knows, and that it's documented. Make sure you know the food and beverage policy about what they can have. You know, make sure you get the lunch menu, figure out how are they going to take their lunch, or are they going to, eat at school. And then please remember that for many of our students, there is assistance, and some districts are able to provide meals to all students, but for some, you will have to fill out a form, and certainly fill that out so that that meal will be provided. It is kind of an income sliding scale, and certainly our students with disabilities, there are some special things there to make sure that we are taking care and that they have the food and nutrition that they need at school. And then that big old thing of communication. First of all, you need to find out what the rules are about cell phones and that you support those rules. I have had the experience of having parents texting their children during the school day. Well, if they're not supposed to have their phones out and you're the teacher and you say, it's my mom, you've just set up a bad situation. So make sure you understand what the rules are. Make sure that your contact information is up to date. One of the things that I hear school personnel say a lot is, we're trying to call and none of the numbers work. And so when that happens, it makes it really hard for schools to communicate. And make sure that you're building that positive school home connection. Ask, how do you want this to go? Talk with your child's teachers. And that kind of gets into some things that you need to know. First of all, if your child has a 504 or an IEP, got to be in place on the first day of school. And that's why I said, if you can let people know ahead of time. So let's just say your child needs a sound system or some specialized equipment. Go ahead and shoot a note now to the school principal and say, hey, just want to make sure this equipment's going to be there. Nothing wrong with that. Be nice. It helps to keep people, and we got to all work together right now. Make sure that you're sharing any information that they need to know, particularly if it's a new school that you're going into. They need to know that. And giving regular reminders about things that will be helpful for them. And making sure that you can ask them, my child has an IEP. Would you like to have a phone conference so I can go over some things with you? It's okay to ask the teachers that. If you're proactive, then they may be able to give you some, that helps them, or you might send a list. Any suggestions? If we can't have a 504 in place, but we're homeschooling, I would go ahead and call right now if you think your child's going to need an IEP or 504. I would try to call and talk to them right now.
I just unmuted myself.
Sure.
So I've been in contact with them all summer. They will not schedule a meeting. They will not discuss an IEP or a 504 until the first day of school. They don't consider her enrolled until the first day of classes. So they will not meet with me. They will not do anything.
So then my response to that, I would make sure they know if there's some specific things your child's going to need. I would say, I want this to be a successful year. And then I'd say, I want to go ahead and schedule a meeting. And I will tell you, and you can also connect with Family Connections. I don't know if you've connected with them yet, because they can help you with that.
Yeah, Sally and I have talked for a while about this. I'm just, as it approaches the first day of school, I'm getting more and more nervous about, like, I've tried to say I want to schedule a meeting on the very first day. Like, I will be there the first day of school, but you know, we not only have an autism diagnosis, but we have chronic medical conditions that need attention. She is an ambulatory wheelchair user, and I'm super, super nervous dropping this kid off for her first day of classes with nothing in place.
And I understand that. Ooh, um, one of the things I would do though is if you do get if you find out who the teacher is, because usually you'll get that information, email the teacher and
Okay.
just tell the teacher what you're concerned about, because that's the person, those are the people, and I don't know what grade, but those are the people that are going to really, they're who make it work, and they want to know. You know, most teachers want to know. And so just say, hey, you know, and tell her your situation, you know, and so that it's very, I would just say doing that is very unfair to your child and to you, but it's also unfair to teachers not to have the support. So I would let the teacher know so that they can at least be thinking about hey, what can we do to help? I will tell you this, if your child has medical needs, go call the nurse, because some things can go through the nurse. We can have individual health plans. There's some information on that on here down, health plans, questions and answers, and that can be done without an IEP. So one of the things, if you're telling me your child has some issues with physical mobility, we could definitely put some of that in a health plan right now to at least get started. So I would contact the school nurse. They come back usually about the same time teachers do. And then this is just an IEP reminder that once your child turns 13, regardless of their disability category, they should have a post-secondary goal, should be developed as part of the IEP process. And it is based on interest and preferences and assessments that are to be done. And remember that this becomes the IEP, and we do some training on this, a whole different training, but you need to know that at this point, at 13, we're really starting to think about what is it that this child needs for them to successfully exit school into their employment, into independent living, into college, whatever their goals are. And so, and it's different. It's based on the child's needs. But at 13, you should see that being developed in the IEP. Has to be there in South Carolina. The federal law says 16, but in South Carolina, we start at 13. And then let teachers know who you are, who's in your family. I grew up, my aunt raised me. I lost my parents when I was in the 3rd grade. And so I didn't have the typical family. We don't have, there's not, but sometimes schools want to make typical families. So let them know. You may have family members living with you. You may have somebody living with you that's not a part of your family, but let the school know who's in your house that's part of your family so that they have that information. If you are, let them know if you have a work schedule. It always helped me to know, because I had some people that said, look, I can't come to the phone. You know, these are times I can't get to a phone. And so knowing that information is important. We had a lot of military families in Berkeley, so it was very helpful when we knew when parents were deployed, when one or more parents were deployed, because that impacts your family. And so sharing that information is important. Making sure that you find out that they know how you want to be communicated with. Do you want the text? Do you want to email? Do you prefer a phone call? What works for you? And it's funny, I hear some parents say, I like text. I hear some people say, don't send me any text, send me an email. But teachers, that's something, and hopefully they're asking you that. And then always make sure your emergency information is up to date. Who can come and pick your child up? Who has that? Make sure if you have any kind of issues with their people who cannot pick your child up, that's very clear. So sometimes there's some court orders about parents. And so make sure the school has that information. So we're ready for that new school year. Just a few little things to think about, and then we're going to wind it up here. Make sure that during the school year, you are doing planning. And you can use a good old plain old piece of paper like this, a calendar. You can use your computer, whatever. These are some free forms that you can click on. You may be using a visual schedule that you're planning for the week. I think visuals are great. I don't care, you know, you don't have to be a child with autism to have a visual, by the way. Visuals work. That's why we have them all over the place to remind us. But make sure that you're going through the things for the week and even reviewing every day. I'm sharing the one my son uses. So this is over their kitchen table. And my oldest grandson, who's going into 6th grade, he likes to know the schedule. So they have their dinner schedule, their lunch, and then any kind of sports or special events that are going on. And I actually took a picture of this one day when I was there. And so on Sundays, they refill the top part and they talk about it. This is what's happening this week. And that's very helpful for them. He's a little anxious. My oldest one's a little anxious. And so that really helps. They sit and they plan together and talk about it and go through this is what's going to happen this week. For some of our teens and tweens, that might be in every evening conversation. You do it at the beginning of the week and then every evening as a reminder. Do remember to set reminders. You can use all kind of things. I love a good old Post-it note, you know, works for me. They're going to need a lot right now. So on my son's door to go out their garage, there's a big sign that says, "Don't forget your computer." and I need those myself. But any of those things, certainly if your tween or teen has a phone, those reminders on the phone are great. My new best friend is, and I won't say it, but that thing from Amazon that, you know, will remind you of things that you can just set reminders. All of those things, great tools. We know memory is a lot of times an issue, particularly when we're dealing with students with attention deficit. A lot of kids with learning disabilities, that short-term memory. So all of those things help us to have smoother days. And then during the year, check their backpack regularly. For one thing, you could be getting something home you're supposed to be getting, but also we want to check to make sure there's nothing unsafe. And that just has to be a rule. And then make sure that if they're parent meetings that you're there. Now, real life happens, right? Some of you have children with disabilities and it's hard to get to those things. Send the teacher a note and say, "I can't get there because of whatever it is." Because sometimes, and this is wrong, what schools do is they start equating your participation with not caring. And that's not correct. That's a wrong assumption. So just be intentional about it. And then make sure you're responding to things that are coming home, emails and things like that during the year. Communicate with your child every day. What was your favorite part of the day? What was hard? What's one thing you learned? Don't ask how was school, because you know you'll get the okay. That's what you're going to get. Okay. Ask those open-ended questions, and then always be keeping an eye on who they talk to. And you can ask those questions to kind of find out, you know, we know that bullying, you know, there's a lot of bullying that goes on. And so we want to ask those questions so that we can be alert. And if you are concerned, you need to contact somebody. Great resources on talking to your child about school. There's like 25 questions on one of them that you can ask your child. Love it. You know, why would we have to think of this? This just gives you great ideas, and these are all free resources. Make sure that you're monitoring social media. Remember that our adolescents' brains are vulnerable to social media, and the people are out there getting them. And so you have to monitor. I have a good friend that has a 13-year-old. She can see every single text her child does with a friend. She can see everything her child is doing on his phone. And so we want to make sure we're doing that and that we model good social media use and watch for any problems. Once again, great resources here from the American Psychological Association for parents about keeping your teens safe. Life happens. So if you have changes, physical, medical, where you're living, something with your work schedule, your contact information, make sure the school knows. And it helps. And always, don't just assume that if you call the school office, it gets there. Send it to more than one person. Let the teacher know and then maybe send it to the school office. Never hurts to overkill. And then I always talk about this now because we've just talked about social media, and our schools are really dealing with a lot right now as I work with schools, because I do both. I work with Family Connections, but I also work with school districts. There's just a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of complaining, and some of it rightfully so. But we need to be positive about school with our child, and if we're positive, they're going to pick up on that. And we need to be very careful about what we're saying negatively. You may not like one of your child's teachers. I certainly did not like all of my children's teachers. They were not my favorite people. My children never knew that. We don't talk about that in front of them. I'm telling you, it comes back to school. Handle those as adults. And if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it there. If you have concerns, go to the school and talk with about the appropriate people. Be excited about school. I was asking my grandson the other day, I said, you ready to go back to school? No. And I said, it's going to be great. Put a positive spin on it. And also, if you have concerns, make sure that you call and ask to talk with the counselor. There are counselors and school psychologists in every building that can help you. They can help you with things that you're worried about with your child. And I mean, that might be, I would definitely contact the counselor even about your child who's going to public school for the first time. And then finally, use social media for good, not to spread rumors. That's the worst thing facing our schools right now, is that one parent gets on social media and blasts that something's happened that may or may not be accurate. It's just not the place to do it. So get on social media for good. Thank teachers for what they're doing. We got to get more teachers, not less. And then make sure that you are using all those outlets to talk about the good things, and when things are wrong, that you go to the school and talk to them about it. Finally, Family Connections has some great resources. This is one of my favorite websites for just general information, healthychildren.org. I gave my daughter a bunch of information off of there for her child starting school. I went, I got some stuff I can send you. It's great. And this is the American Academy of Pediatrics. Actually, this is their website for parents, and it's a great resource. And then this is safety tips for kids, and it's got some great tips on there for safety. The DHEC guidelines for vaccines. Our stuff for school health comes from the Department of Health and Environmental Control. So sometimes you can go on there and Google if you're looking for things. And then this is just one of the references I used on the first day of school. So all done, ready to start. Remember that there are resources available for you. Some of our districts have parent groups that can support you. Those are questions you can ask at the school. But as always, Family Connections is always here to support and help you in this journey for school. And you will survive middle and high school, I promise. You may be like me and a little grayer, but you will survive it. All
Thank you
right.
so much, Susan. I actually, and if anybody has questions, you guys feel free to unmute or pop it in the chat. I did think of one question I thought I would ask when you were talking about the supplemental aids and services for extracurriculars. If a student needs those supports and those accommodations, should those then be written into the IEP? Is that where that lives for families to reference?
Yes, it does. It
Yep.
goes in, it should go in the IEP. And so, if your child has an IEP and then decides this year that they want to participate in something, that can be done through an amendment.
Okay.
But it definitely needs to be put in there to make sure that it's done.
Okay, thank you. And I think similar to kind of Courtney's question about starting the school year with new things, if a student, let's say in elementary, did not need transportation, but now in middle needs transportation, does the entire IEP team need to come together? Is that something that could be done just through the transportation office? How does that happen?
If they need specialized transportation, that has to be done through an IEP. And so it can be that those are meetings that we don't have to include all the members of the team. That's a great example of where an excusals might be appropriate.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting question about adaptive PE, because that is one thing that special ed talks about, that we do have to plan for adaptive PE and how they'll do that. A lot of school districts kind of write that into the accommodation section of it, about how they will adapt and modify the PE curriculum. And so it can be done there, but it's certainly for a child who has physical disabilities, that needs to be part of that.
Awesome. Are there any other questions, you guys? Yeah, Courtney.
It was too long to type, so I'm just gonna ask it. Do y'all have suggestions or guidance on where I can find guidelines for what schools need to be doing to be ADA compliant? For example, like there are ramps in her building, but like I can walk the building and none of the doors have, like push buttons so that she can open the door from her wheelchair. So I don't know where to find like that type of information.
And I will tell you, that's not a requirement that for ADA. I know that particular one, but you can call. Every district has a person that is responsible for ADA, and just tell them, find that person, and ask them. A lot of times it's a special ed director.
Okay. So if there are things like, for example, like I said, with the doors, any suggestions or ideas, like safety is a concern for me. Like if she needs to get out of the building quickly, she's not going to be able to necessarily get out of the classroom.
So those are things that we want to write. We want to make sure that those are included. I would say those are things that we want to talk to the school about, and that they can have a plan. Oh, that's somebody said assistive technology has some good things too. But I always just say, once your child gets the accommodations, and by the way, they could probably put a 504 in place pretty quickly. And then if she needs more or he needs more, they could go into more. And those things could be put then in that plan. That would give protection.
Okay. So we could start with the 504, and then can they do the process to evaluate her eligibility for an IEP with the 504 in place? Like how?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just the 504 doesn't have all the things you have to do. It's easier to get in place. And so that would probably be the first thing I'd go for.
Okay. And then so she'll be starting 9th grade. Sorry, I have tons of questions, but it's been Sally's laughing at me. It's been an experience, let me tell you. So I kind of got some pushback when I mentioned an IEP, in that they didn't want to do an IEP for her age because she can take the 504 with her to college. So they only want to do 504s. But this is a kid with autism with significant executive functioning issues, and then all of the medical stuff as well.
So there's a lot I could say about this, but my suggestion is that you continue to talk with Sally, because we
Okay.
have dealt with a couple of situations like this, and we can help you with how to navigate that to make sure that, you know, that they don't have to give her an IEP. But what we do have to do is consider an evaluation. And if they were not to do an evaluation, if you wanted your child evaluated for an IEP, okay, they don't have to do it, but they got to be able to give you good reasons why not.
Okay.
And that has to be given to you in writing. And so,
Okay.
you know, most people are going to go ahead, if you're requesting an evaluation in writing, which it needs to be in writing, they're going to probably at least meet to talk about it. And then they would have to give you reasons why not. So I would just, you know, there's some things, and Sally can certainly help navigating that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, you guys, well, we are at 8 o'clock. So thank you guys so much for hanging in with us tonight and joining this evening. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for all the great information. And like Dr. Thomas mentioned, we will be emailing you the PowerPoint and the resources that were shared tonight. Our director of training is out of the office at the moment. She's actually out of the country. So as soon as I can get access to the email addresses, I can get those sent out to you guys. But give me maybe just a day or two, and then we will get those sent out to you. And then, like always, if you guys need us at Family Connection, please feel free to reach out and get connected through our website or our 800 phone or 800 number for our support and information line. But we appreciate you hanging in with us tonight, and we will see you next time. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Bye.